I want to thank you all for joining us to our Tools for Life virtual workshop called Tips for Making a Positive Environmental Impact in Your Home and Community. My name is Amanda Bollig. I'm the Program Project Specialist here at Loudoun Habitat for Humanity. I oversee our home repair program as well as the Tools for Life Learning Center. We have a lot to talk about today, so we're going to jump right into things by explaining some of our discussion points for today so you know exactly what we're going to be talking about. We're first going to try to answer the question, can you really make a positive impact in your environment? And we are quickly going to answer that with a yes, because there are several ways that you can positively impact the environment, even in just your everyday life. And that includes taking care of your yard, which is what we're going to wrap up our presentation with at the end. Joining us today, we have two very knowledgeable guests. We have Carrie-Anne Mosley, the Board Vice President of Keep Loudoun Beautiful. We also have Michael Myers, who's the Executive Director of the Loudoun Wildlife Conservancy. Both Carrie-Anne and Michael are very passionate about our environment and the local Loudoun community, and they were recently added to the Loudoun Environment Commission as members of that. They are designated by our Board of Supervisors. So we're very excited to have both of them with us because we know they have a lot of expertise and knowledge to share in this topic. If you have questions for Carrie-Anne or for Michael during the presentation, you can use your chat box and put them in there, but we probably won't answer them until the end of the presentation when we have some time specifically designated for question and answer. But if you have a question and you don't want to forget it, feel free to go ahead and just put it right in the chat box and we'll make sure to answer it at the end of the presentation. Okay, we are going to jump into things with our very first question, which is, can you really make a positive impact in your environment? And I know this probably sounds like a very daunting task, something that's really hard to do, but I can tell you that yes, you can. So I was able to spend some time with Carrie-Anne and she explained to me that even just small actions can make a big impact in your community. So she's going to share a little bit with us about how our environment especially needs our help now after COVID-19 and some of the ways that our local Loudoun County residents are making a big impact in our community. So Carrie-Anne, I'm going to go ahead and pass it off to you to get us started.
Thank you so much, Amanda. As you know, litter is all throughout our community and so very much of a problem in communities across the country. Keep Loudoun Beautiful was started in 1972, and I believe that we had the goal of putting ourselves out of business within a few years. But unfortunately, as population density has increased, so has litter. And this year, the litter imperative is even more serious because people are afraid to pick up trash because it might have some viruses or be dirty, and there's a big fear of picking up someone else's waste, but also the addition of PPE, gear, face masks, disposable gloves. You're probably seeing them in the parking lot of your local grocery store or big box store. When people take them off and they're trying to put things in their car, they accidentally fall on the ground and become litter. So we really have quite an imperative. Another issue with litter now is people are spending more time outside because of COVID, which is a great thing. However, they're not always responsible with the waste that they create when they are going outside. Next slide. Another challenge for us, given all of the situation with COVID, is a lot of the group cleanups have been canceled. VDOT has been running collection trucks, litter collection trucks with only one person, the driver, to stay COVID safe and keep their employees COVID safe. Many of our large trash bash events where we normally have 300 people coming out have had to be scaled back and socially distant. So it's even more important for individual citizens and small groups and family groups to participate in this solution because the problem is so amplified by more people outside, more trash being created with PPE, and these large annual cleanup events being canceled. Next slide. So you might ask yourself, where does this litter go? I mean, it is so tragic that most litter ultimately ends up in our storm drains and in our waterways. And anyone who has spent time around the water sees some of the sites like you see in these photos. And ultimately, our wildlife are affected. I spend a lot of time down in the northern neck of Virginia with my mother who lives there. And in the last several years, we've noticed the number of ducks and birds that have massive deformities from consuming trash and litter that they thought was food. And so an animal does not have the vision and the eyesight to differentiate what is trash and what is not. And so as you see litter near a storm drain, I would ask you to please take action and make sure it doesn't go down in those storm drains, because ultimately it ends up in our waterways, polluting not only the physical pollution it generates, but ultimately the seepage into the water source, which is dangerous for wildlife and humans as well. Next slide. As an example, I wanted to share some of the results of our recent cleanups. In January, we got a call from the Loudoun County Sheriff's that said, you've got to come help us on Acadia Lane in Sterling. And when we got there, we were stunned to find the debris that you see in the orange bags photoed in the lower left. But we were so stunned to find over 900 glass bottles from beer dumped in a lot on the side of this commercial property. Really, really stunning. And clearly there had been one heck of a party, maybe multiple parties in that location. But ultimately the glass was in such high quality shape. We clearly just missed the party, that we were able to recycle over 900 non-broken glasses of Heineken bottles. So really, really distressful situation, and something that requires our attention. We have to always be looking out. See something, say something. If you see someone dumping or having a party in a place that it doesn't look like they should have a party, or dumping on a vacant lot or cul-de-sac, you have to report it to local law enforcement. In this case, thankfully, someone did just that, but they were a little bit late and we were not able to catch the culprits, but we were able to clean up the area, restore it to its natural beauty, and in the process, recycle a pretty significant amount of glass. Next slide. In July, we had our annual watershed cleanup. 50 volunteers came together, and there was a whole bunch of volunteers behind the scenes, but 50 volunteers took to the canoes and went down the river and collected large trash and over 125 tires. It was really an incredible event. We do this annually, but the fact that every time we go back, we find more is just, we're again not successfully putting ourselves out of business because people are still illegally dumping in our waterways and on our streets. We would like to thank the Claude Community Builders. They sent 20 students to help us haul everything from the boats to the dumpsters and the recycling containers, and they were a huge help to us. And it's the dedication of those 70 volunteers really helps to make an impact. And you can see how loaded up the canoes were with large debris. We even took out a recycling full trash can from the Potomac River. But it was, dedicated volunteers who came out on a day when it was real hot, but helped us get a part of the Potomac River cleaned up. But that's the kind of effort that we need people to take in our community to make an impact on this epidemic that we have around litter and illegal waste disposal. Next slide.
Well, those are some really great ways that people are taking action right here in Loudoun County. But what can we do in our day-to-day? And that's actually a really easy answer that I'm sure a lot of you have already heard before, which is just to reduce, reuse, and recycle. So Carrie-Anne, can you explain a little more about reducing, reusing, and recycling?
I'm so happy to do that, Amanda. Thank you. The number one thing you can do to make an impact, and it's something that is so simple, but you can reduce the amount of trash you generate. That is the number one thing that you can do for the environment, even if you do nothing else. Try to generate less trash. And you can do that by grabbing a reusable container with a drink before you leave the house to run your errands. You can do that by bringing a reusable bag with you when you go not only to the grocery store, but also to the mall or any other place where you're going to be picking up items and bringing them back to your homes. Oftentimes we have reusable bags in our cars and we forget to bring them in the store. And I know it's hard to remember. So you have to really make a conscious effort. But I've left my shopping cart, the doorway of the grocery store full of groceries several times so I could run out to the car to grab my bags before I check out. It's really, really important. Also, when you're doing carry out, definitely let them know we're going to be eating at home. Don't include utensils in our order, or just put it into the plastic containers that you're going to give me to take home, and I'll bring my own bag when I arrive at your restaurant to pick it up. Another thing that I have to say has become a real environmental issue is balloon launches, balloons as decorations, balloon launches. Balloons in public are problematic, particularly when they're let go. So we want to avoid anything where we're letting go this thing that will ultimately come down and probably be caught by a bird. So again, just try to refuse anything disposable in your environment while you're out on the day-to-day. You can also, there's a lot of great stuff like reusable beeswax wrap. You can get it on Amazon.com, and a lot of local retailers sell it. But it takes the place of saran wrap and aluminum foil. Also, as we're sending the kids back to school, it's important to put their lunch in a reusable Tupperware-like container so that you're not having your children to throw away single-use plastic bags on a daily basis. That is a big way you can impact change. Plus, you're teaching great habits to your children. Children can be great, though, to remind you to bring your bags into stores. So I often will say to my daughter, don't let me go into the mall without grabbing a bag out of the back seat, or don't let me go into the grocery store. So enlist the support of, your buddy in the car with you to help keep you in check, whether you're going to bring a drink with you in the car, bring those reusable bags with you, but just try to refuse and reduce the amount of single-use items in your home. Next slide. Reusing and repurposing is easier now than ever. There are so many great consignment shops here in Loudoun County. Whether it's the Habitat for Humanity Restore. There's also some great consignment shops for clothing. We have listed the Facebook page of one of them, Consign Mine, near Dulles. There's also on Facebook great free cycle and recycle pages where people just give stuff away. And that's what we should be doing. Instead of putting that big load of trash out at the curb, sharing our unused items with neighbors. A lot of people right now are upcycling old furniture, they're painting it, giving it a new life. That's what we should really be trying to do. And we need to get to a place where as adults, we accept a secondhand gift or a repurposed gift just as with the excitement that we would have accepted something brand new. But we've got to get creative and start repurposing items so that we're sending less to our landfills and less things go unused. Next slide. And finally, I wanted to talk about recycling because I think a lot of people take comfort and say, I'm going to recycle this piece of trash, or I'm going to recycle this plastic bottle. But truly, we cannot recycle our way out of this problem. And the photos below, and you have to take a close look at them because they're hard to process from a size perspective. But those bales that you're seeing on the right-hand side, those are taller than a person, each of those bales. And that's how our products are recycled. So we send stuff to our, put it in our curbside bin, and then it gets processed. And a big part of the process is a weight-driven process. So certain items weigh a certain thing, and machines generally separate the recycling objects from one another. So they separate the plastic from the aluminum, from the cardboard. And then the items are put in large bales, as you see in the photos below. And the large bales are sold to companies that do recycling and then sell the ultimate commodity, the ultimate recycled commodity, whether it's plastic or glass or cardboard. And the way it works is the bale is made, and then an inspector comes and walks around the bale. And there's a certain amount of things that don't qualify that they are checking off. And if a particular bale hits that certain threshold, so I'm an inspector and I've walked around and I see, 25 plastic things that don't qualify for recycling, the entire bale, that bale that's taller than a person, gets thrown in the garbage. That's why so much of our recycled materials are not actually recycled. Also, today, there's not a significant consumer for glass and plastic that is recycled because we are producing those commodities at such a fast pace, and glass in particular is not, significantly in demand right now because people are buying more plastic and aluminum. So it's important to not make yourself feel good and say, I'm just going to recycle this and keep doing the same process of purchasing single-use plastic bottles, but rather consider reducing and using your reusable containers for drinks and other things versus recycling. Can we go to the next slide? So we have to be very careful too about what we recycle. And they call it aspirational recycling. But as you can see in this picture, there are people with chainsaws or sawzalls in a recycling machine cutting out soft plastic that has accumulated and is now keeping the machine from working. In Loudoun County, the following items are not accepted for curbside recycling: food and food waste, any type of plastic bags. No plastic bags can be recycled in your curbside recycling. Any plastic item that is not a bottle, a jug, or a jar. Styrofoam, chemicals, diapers, clothing, or textiles, pizza boxes, napkins, tissues, paper towels, paper plates, shredded paper, any kind of latex face mask, or scrap metal. So just sort of take all that in, because what that tells you is if you are throwing those things that are plastic but not a bottle, jar, or jug, or you're throwing styrofoam in there, what's going to happen to your recycling is it's going to be put in the garbage. So it's very important that you not do aspirational recycling, because the net result of that is that then the larger population of the recycled items will simply be put in the trash. So please do not do aspirational recycling. Next slide, please. So as you can hear, I hope I've made a compelling case for reducing. Let's talk about how you can do that. Next slide. Keep those reusable bags in your car. I know it's so hard that we have a bunch of them at our house because we'll go shopping and forget them, but it's really important that you try to take them. Invest in some mesh bags for fruit, for bakery items, for things that may not go directly into your shopping cart without a plastic bag. You can buy mesh bags at your local retailer or on Amazon and utilize those. Uh, it's really important to also think about cutting down on paper towels. I think COVID was a great exercise for a lot of families when we ran out of toilet paper and paper towels at the stores to really examine our relationship with paper products. But we should have dish towels located next to our sinks so that people are inclined to use those washable towels, which have a much smaller energy footprint to both produce and then reuse than the pretty significant water chemicals process to create paper towels. Also, paper napkins can be replaced with cloth napkins. You can get a set of 24 cloth napkins for like under $20 on Amazon. They wash really well. And at our family, we keep them in our normal napkin container and just throw them in the laundry after each use. So there are ways that you can reduce your footprint that aren't too impactful. One I also want to mention is using bar soap. We've gotten to this place where we use all different types of foamy soaps and fabulous soaps. But if we get back to using bar soaps, the footprint, the bottles of soap that we're going to save are significant. Also, with bottled soap, if you want to use bottled hand soap, as a lot of people do, you can buy refills for your bottles at the grocery store that are made out of a softer plastic that's a lower footprint as well. But do also consider buying larger containers. So for your shampoo, you could do bar soap, but there is bar soap shampoo, by the way. You can buy it online for sure. But buy the larger bottles because less energy has been used to create those larger bottles. Also, they're much easier to recycle versus the smaller bottles that sometimes get caught up in the recycling machinery. So think about some easy ways that you can reduce. Next slide, please. Gifting. I would love to tell you that in the holiday season, 227,000 miles of wrapping paper circling the earth 9 times are used annually. 227,000 miles of wrapping paper. It's just incredible. So when you think about the holiday season coming up in just not even 6 months, unfortunately, 4 months, please consider wrapping your gifts in a reusable gift bag that then people can use when they go to the grocery store or to the mall. Avoid fast fashion gifts, give an experience gift. Shop local when you can. I know I've mentioned the Amazon a few times. They are one of the largest consumers of cardboard and really do a great job in cardboard recycling. But shop local if you can. Help our local small businesses to stay in business. And really do your best to buy natural toys and don't overbuy, particularly for children. So much plastic children's toys end up in the landfill. It's a very unfortunate situation every year. So please, when you're gifting, consider a reused gift, a gift that is something that has been in your family or that you bought at a consignment shop. Consider wrapping it in a reusable bag or some sort of compostable bag or wrapping paper. And then again, shop local. Next slide. I'm going to get to this in 1 second, but I did want to mention one other thing about plastic wrap. You can recycle plastic bags that are clean, the wrapping that goes around your paper towels, the wrapping that goes around your toilet paper rolls, provided you haven't made it wet all of that stuff can be recycled at the big box store. So when you walk into Walmart or you walk into your grocery store, usually right there on by the door, they have a big box that says plastic bag recycling. So you can take those airbags that come in your box from Amazon, pop holes in them, and then it becomes a flat piece of soft plastic. Provided that it's not dirty, you can put that in your recycling at the big box stores. So I want to encourage you to, if you have some plastic bags that you're not using, and you generate plastic waste around your toilet paper, paper towels, with packaging items that, those air puff bags that come in Amazon boxes, you can please take those when you go to the grocery store or the big box store and put them in the boxes right next to the front door that say plastic bag recycling. But please get involved. There are so many groups, Keep Loud and Beautiful, and we're going to learn from Mr. Myers about another group that's doing great work in Loudoun County. But think about how you can get involved personally with either a group or organize your own cleanup of the neighborhood. If you have a neighborhood Facebook group or an email address for your neighborhood, think about organizing a cleanup. It really is super easy. If you want to contact us at Keep Loud and Beautiful, which will be on the screen later in the presentation, you can send us a mail message and we will get you supplies. If you guys do a bigger cleanup, VDOT will even pick up the waste, or you can put it in your own curbside trash collection. But the little things that you do, like if you're taking your dog for a walk, I take my dog for a walk all the time. I just bring a bag with me and I pick up litter along the way. It's a really easy thing to do. So it's a great example for the children in your neighborhood, for your other neighbors that you're cleaning up. But just doing the little things like bringing a reusable water bottle when you leave your house, when you go to the store, will save you from having to purchase something while you're out. So it's money saving and lowering your footprint. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask a little later during the Q&A. And with that, I'll turn it back to Amanda.
Well, thank you, Carrie-Anne. Those were some really great and honestly very easy things that we can do to incorporate into our everyday lives to help reduce the footprint that you were talking about. But now I want to jump into talking a little bit more about taking care of even just our own backyard. So how does taking care of our yard help the environment? And I got to spend some time with Michael, and he explained to me that it's actually really important to do that. Protecting our natural resources are essential to life for people and for the wildlife around us, because really what he explained is people and wildlife thrive together. So Michael, can you share a little bit more about what your organization does and about the Healthy Yard Pledge?
Sure, absolutely, Amanda. So I am the executive director of the Loudoun Wildlife Conservancy. We've been around here in Loudoun County since 1995, and our mission is to inspire, motivate, and engage people to protect, preserve, and restore wildlife habitat in Loudoun County. And we can go to the next slide. We do that through 4 main focus areas of our program. So we have advocacy, citizen science, education, and habitat conservation. And we're a membership-based organization, which means we have members who join and pay dues. But then we continue to be volunteer driven. So under all of these program categories, we have a variety of programs that are all run by volunteers within our organization. And so today, what I would like to focus on is one of our habitat conservation programs. So we can go to the next slide. And that's our Audubon at Home program. So our Audubon at Home program certifies wildlife sanctuaries, or certifies people's yards as wildlife sanctuaries. And this program is in coordination with the Audubon Society of Northern Virginia. And so with them, we are this, it's a regional effort, and we are the stewards for Loudoun County for this program. We'll get into some of the details about this program as more in depth in a few minutes. But the basis of it is that, as Carrie-Anne was saying, small things go a long way. And one of the things that we all can do is create wildlife habitat in our yards. And by doing so, that creates a more interconnected network that provides a lot of habitat. There are a lot of households, so if we each pitch in and we each do our part, we can make a big difference. And that's what really this program is all about. We want to inspire people to get involved. So basically how the process works is that you can go online, go onto our website, fill out an application that says, yes, I'm interested in doing more in my yard. And then we have trained ambassadors who will visit your property free of charge and give you tips on how you can make your yard more wildlife friendly. And then we give a whole report typed up and sent to you. And then what you can do is record the sanctuary species. So we have a whole list of species that could really use some help. So if you're providing habitat and attracting those species, that means you're doing a great job in your yard. So some of them are, there's a variety of species from birds to butterflies to bees to other insects and amphibians. And some of them are classified as individual species, and some of them are just groups. So for instance, with bees, if you're attracting native bees, then that's great. And so since there's so many different varieties of native bees, so you only have to attract 10, and we have about 30 or so species on that list that you can attract to your yard. And then you report back and you report your successes of what you've done in your yard back to us. And we're like, yes, you have checked off all the boxes to be certified. And then as you can see in this picture here of these people, they're holding a sign. So you can display a sign that says that this property has been certified as a wildlife sanctuary by Loudoun Wildlife and the Audubon Society of Northern Virginia. And that will also inspire other people because they could see you working in your yard, see all the plants and habitat that you've created. And then they see this sign. So it helps tell people, you know, I support wildlife and I support doing things in my yard to make the world a better place for wildlife. And the one other component of this program, and which I really want to dive in today, is the Healthy Yard Pledge. So the Healthy Yard Pledge is one of the components that you sign a pledge saying, yes, I will do these things because these things are known to have positive impacts for wildlife and wildlife habitat. So we can go to the next slide. So the Healthy Yard Pledge is a variety of steps, and we're just gonna we'll run through each of these steps a little bit more in depth as one of the key components of the Audubon at Home program. So the first thing, and probably the most important thing that everyone can do, is reduce pesticide and fertilizer use. I mean, I don't know that anybody likes mosquitoes, but they're part of the system, the ecosystem, and part of the world. So if we use pesticides to reduce mosquito populations, guess what? Pesticides don't care. So you're going to be impacting the bees, you're going to be impacting the butterflies, all of the insects, all the way down at the very bottom of the food chain, all those toxins and poisons. So say your yard is treated with pesticides, guess what? You're not going to attract bees, you're not going to attract butterflies, or if you do, you're going to end up poisoning them. And then the birds, they eat the poisoned insects. And so that's how it kind of filters up the ecosystem and the food chain, and really has really detrimental impacts. And pollinators, as we know, are vital for the structure of everything in our ecosystem, from what the food we eat, just to like the flowers, needing pollinators for reproduction. I mean, it's really astounding what's happening, and the bee decline throughout the world has gotten people's attention. The monarch butterflies, obviously, are keystone species that get a lot of notoriety as well. But it kind of traces all back to these pesticides, and we're basically poisoning our environment and poisoning one of the most important components of our environment and our pollinators. And so with that, you know, you can either not use pesticides, which is always our preferred option, but just thinking smarter about when you're using them, why you're using them, how you're using them, and all of those things. And it's the same with fertilizers. You know, fertilizers, we'll talk a little bit more about lawns as well, but you probably could use smaller quantities than what you're using. So it's like using the appropriate amount at the appropriate time so they're not running off. When we talk about fertilizer use, a lot of it, if there's excessive amounts of fertilizer being used, and then it rains, they just run off the lawns and then they end up in our waterways. Much like the litter ends up in our waterways, that's where the fertilizers end up as well. And so we start getting nitrates and other things, and that reduces water quality, which is a huge, huge thing that, being in the Chesapeake Bay, we have standards in the state of Virginia and the Chesapeake Bay watershed to reduce those nitrates and other chemicals in our waterways. And a lot of that is tied back to fertilizers. So just being responsible with your uses and really looking at why you're using them and how you're using them. And so we'll circle back around to other ways to help reduce pests. But as we'll get to, one of the things that you can do is attract the predator insects that eat those little pests. So that's like one of the best ways to reduce those pests in your yard is by attracting the other insects that like to eat those pests, which also include birds, which consume large amounts of insects. So we can go to the next slide. And so with our Healthy Yard Pledge, then the next one is to conserve water and to protect water quality. We've touched upon, protecting water quality. We can do that through reducing fertilizer use, but also if you have a stream on your property, or this is from a lake in a townhome HOA area, but there's in the foreground here, there's a lot of Joe Pye weed, and it provides a buffer. So whether you have a wetland, a lake, a pond, a stream, what you can do is you can plant native plants along the edge of that waterway, and it helps filter any of the runoff and helps really clean the water before it enters the major waterway. And so that's one of the areas where you can create a buffer to a waterway, but also when we're talking about conserving water. So whether there's a variety of tools and things that you can do in your yard to conserve water, one of which you can have rain barrels and collect water off of your roof to use that to water your gardens or your lawns. Or, if you have to water your yard or your garden, doing it at the right time of day, early in the morning when it's not so hot outside, so there's less evaporation from the water, or late at night. And one of the tools you can do is also set a timer on your hoses, so they only go for a certain amount of time, so you're not overwatering your yards, because that also gets into runoff and is another one of those. All of these things in the Healthy Yard Pledge all kind of tie together. So it's really being smart about that. And then all of these are focused on things you can do in your yard, but there's also things you can do inside your home to reduce the amount of water that you're using. And that can have a big difference, whether you're washing your dishes, or how you're washing your clothes, or washing yourself with showers and bath time and brushing your teeth and things like that. And just being conscientious of the quantities of water that you're using can have a big impact on the environment as well. So we can go to the next slide. So the next couple slides go hand in hand. So, removing invasive non-native plants. And these two pictures is a before and after. And this was from my house. And when we moved into our property, there was this huge ornamental shrub, and it wasn't really providing a lot of value for habitat, or a lot of value for wildlife. And there's a little bit of structure and protection going on there, but not so much. It was mostly just overgrown, and pollinators didn't like it. And then I planted. This was right after I planted it, so I don't have the third after picture, where this year is full of flowers. So there's some black-eyed Susans in there. There's some blazing star, and there's a couple other phlox and some other things. And that's a very small space. That's probably about 2 feet by 5 feet. But you get these non-native plants and these invasive species, and they take over areas. A lot of them, you may know, like autumn olive and stilt grass and honeysuckle. And there are a lot of these plants. English ivy is another big one. in this area. So removing those invasive non-native species can go a long way because they're not providing the ecosystem services and the value to wildlife as other native plants. Because basically with any ornamental shrub that you may see that may have come with your house when you purchased it, or was planted by landscapers, there's a native alternative that provides all of those benefits that the non-native plant provides and more because they've evolved with our native species. So we can go to the next slide. And so the corollary to that is planting native species. And this can be depending on where you live and how much property you have, it can be a very daunting task. And we definitely understand that. And so, trying to take off bite-sized chunks where you can have a huge impact. This picture here, you see some butterfly weed that's going to seed, which is for, obviously monarch butterflies. It's one of their host plants. And then there's a lot of black-eyed Susans there. And it's in a little neat mulched area. This photo is from an HOA, and there's a lot of people, we get a lot of comments from people that are like, oh, well, I have all these restrictions in my HOA on what I can plant and what I can't plant and how we can do that. Well, you can have very neat and tidy native plant areas, and they'll still provide a lot of benefits for wildlife. And it's really amazing once you start removing the invasive species. If you have, say, a more of a wooded lot and more acreage, once you remove those invasives, natives will start popping up. And it's really incredible about what pops up and what's in the seed bank once you remove all those native plants or non-native plants and the invasive species, and all the native plants pop up. And one of the great resources we're always telling people to visit, Doug Tallamy is an author and he has a lot of great books and videos. We have a video on our website, on our Audubon homepage, about the benefits of native plants and really in terms of, seed production and being the host plant for pollinators. So when we talk about pollinators and we need to have their host plants. Not only do they need food, but there's a lot of specialization where, the monarch butterfly, for instance, they can only lay their eggs on milkweed, and that's what their caterpillars eat. And there, a lot of pollinators are similar. Some are generalized, where they can eat a lot of different things, but a lot of caterpillars can only eat one particular plant. So it's not only planting native species, that provide a lot of nectar for the pollinators, but also providing their host plants where their caterpillars can survive is crucial. So we can go to the next slide. And then one of the big things that you can do is, also people think big. We oftentimes talk about, wildlife corridors and how we can have not fragment habitat, which is great for mammals and larger animals and definitely necessary. But at the same time, when we're talking about the suburban environment and pollinators, it's just getting these little areas can add up and basically create little way stations and sanctuaries where they can visit. So a big part of that is reducing your lawn area. And this photo is from one of our certified properties, and it's a little townhome. And so you notice all the plants are shorter than the fence, so it complies with all their HOA rules. But she's been able to plant a variety of heights and structure for pollinators. Well, a lot of flowers for pollinators, but the height and structure gives other animals places to hide and protects them from predators. In the middle there, you see a little water feature, because that's one of the things where we talk about, like, how can you really create wildlife habitat? You need food, you need water, you need shelter, and then you can protect them from pesticides as well. So this picture kind of encapsulates all of those things while reducing lawn area. One of the I wouldn't say necessarily myths, but one of the paradigms that's been promoted in this country for hundreds of years, since the beginning really, where people get into these monocultures of lawns, and it becomes like the American dream with the white picket fence and the big lawn and the big house and all of that. But monocultures of lawns, they take a lot of work or a lot of time, energy, or dollars to maintain them. And what ends up happening is people end up spraying a lot of pesticides and herbicides on their lawns and chemicals and they're really just killing, they're killing pollinators and they're killing insects, and they're not really providing any ecosystem services that benefit wildlife habitats. So if you reduce your lawn area and plant it with native plants, then you're starting to check off all those boxes, and you'll start seeing, butterflies and bees and insects and dragonflies. When we talk about, those pests, dragonflies eat tons of mosquitoes, and they need water. So you really need a water source, and you can bring in dragonflies, attract dragonflies, and they'll eat the mosquitoes. So it's all kind of tied together in this interconnected system. And reducing your lawn area, some people, obviously, if you have children that like to play, yes, there is some lawn area, but around those edges, where can you tidy it up? Or with this homeowner in their townhome, didn't have a big lawn to start with, but they were still able to reduce that space, and it looks beautiful, as you can see in this picture here. So we can go to the next slide. And then, so the idea, the whole principle and point of this is to support birds and other wildlife. So when we're looking at pictures of, black-eyed Susans, they create a lot of seed heads, and so you get goldfinches and other birds that depend on those seeds. While you can feed the birds through a bird feeder, obviously, there's also natural ways where you can feed them, and you can plant plants like cardinal flower and other plants that will attract hummingbirds. There's also the clear-wing hummingbird moths, which you can also attract. And so it's providing a great biodiversity of species in your yard, will support birds and other wildlife. And you'll really be amazed. It is one of those things where if you build it, they will come. And that's kind of the basis of this principle. If you build great habitat, you will attract the species, and you will really be supporting wildlife where we can thrive together with them. So we can go to the next slide. And so that's where we let the wildlife decide on how well is your property. Is your property really a wildlife sanctuary? Well, you need to attract the target species. So as I mentioned, this list has been developed of the target species based on things that really need some help and are really indicators that you have really great habitat. So swallowtail butterflies are one of those groups of species that if you're attracting them, you're doing a good job. Are you attracting woodpeckers? Great. And that means you have likely have snags on your property and creating holes in habitat for other things. And so it's really letting the wildlife decide. And so we leave it up to each of the people who apply, because you're there in your yard all the time. And like, how many of these have you attracted? And you can just check them off, and you can create habitat for a variety of habitat to attract those species. And part of our report that we give out and our ambassadors give out gives recommendations, like if you really want to attract more native bees, here are some things that you can plant. If you want to attract hummingbirds, here are things you can plant. And so it really try to give some advice to attract these species to your yard. So we can go to the next slide. And then with that, it's like you can become certified. So once that you fill out the application, we give you the report. You give us a follow-up and let us know, like, hey, I've attracted all of these species. You can become certified. Some people who do it, it starts right at the beginning of the process. So you can look at online at our list, and you're like, you know what? My yard already has all of those things, which is great. Like, we already have all these species, which is fantastic. So, but from there, we'll still come out, we'll still do a site visit, and we can give you little tips on where maybe like you're having issues with an invasive species like mile a minute or something that's a little tougher to handle. We can point you to some resources on how to treat them and pull them from your yard. Or if you're like, my lawn is about as small as it can get. There might be some ways where we can help with that, or you're like, I don't know where I would put a water feature so they have water. All of those little things, we can definitely provide some advice on how you can make an impact on the environment in your yard. And then one of the great things about being certified, you can get this little sign. it attracts a conversation. And so that's like one of the other ways, like earlier, like how can you get involved? One of the ways you can get involved is sharing your passion with others. So talk about what you're doing in your yard, whether it's with your friends, at your church group, with your HOA, your family members, post it on social media and really spread the word and let people know, like, hey, we can all make a difference here locally in our yards. And if we all do our part, we can make a difference and have a really big impact. And so that's the message that I'd like to leave you with. I mean, obviously, if you're doing these things and taking the Healthy Yard Pledge, even if you don't become certified, you don't have to become certified as a wildlife sanctuary, but our website has a ton of great resources, and we can point you in the right direction of different native plants you can plant for wildlife, and a variety of other resources. So we hope that this empowers you to make more decisions to benefit wildlife habitat. And that's the end of our presentation. So I know Amanda's going to do a little bit of wrap up here. But thank you so much, everyone, for listening to this presentation. And I want to thank Carrie-Anne from Keep Loudoun Beautiful as well, because we can all make a difference here locally in Loudoun.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you, Carrie-Anne. That was a lot of really great information. I know I learned quite a bit, things I didn't even think about, like reducing the size of my yard. I would have never thought to do that as a way I can help impact the environment and make a wildlife sanctuary. So thank you both for all the information you shared. So we have some key points from today's workshop, just some reminders to help you take everything that we've learned and kind of condense it a little bit. So we talked about how our local environment needs our help, especially after COVID-19, and really how just small actions can make a big impact. And that includes reducing, reusing, and recycling, and taking the Healthy Yard Pledge to protect our wildlife. If you want to learn more about what Michael does, what Carrie-Anne does, the Loudoun Environmental Commission, you can check out the websites on the screen. They're actually going to go up in the chat box as well. And the other thing that we wanted to mention is, Carrie-Anne said this earlier, but the Loudoun Habitat for Humanity Restore. This is another great way to divert items from the dump. You can donate there, or you can purchase used items, and all the proceeds go back into our programming for home ownership, home repair, and even the Learning Center here today. So really great resources here for you. Check out their websites and please reach out to them if you want to learn more about their programming. So now we're going to have a little bit of time for question and answer. If you have a question for Carrie-Anne or for Michael, you can put it into the chat box now and we will answer as many as we have time for. But I have a couple of questions just to go ahead and get us started out. We have just a few minutes left before we're going to wrap things up. So Carrie-Anne, you mentioned about cleaning up the beer bottles and you mentioned cleaning up the waterways. If I wanted to get involved with something like that, how could I do that?
Thank you for asking, Amanda. So we have 2 times of year where we are specifically working on community cleanups. And that's the month of April to coincide with Earth Day. April is Keep Loudoun Beautiful month. So there are many cleanups on virtually every weekend. But this year, we're also doing some additional cleanups in October. And Keep Virginia Beautiful and Keep America Beautiful will be joining us in those efforts. But we are going to be having our annual Cascades Trash Bash in October. And you can find out more on our website or just follow us on our Facebook page, the Keep Loudoun Beautiful Facebook page, and we'll be posting a sign up to participate in that event probably in early September. So please keep an eye out for all announcements, but there will likely be multiple cleanups in October, but for sure the Cascades Trash Bash.
That's perfect. We just put the Facebook page for Keep Loudoun Beautiful in the chat box. So if anybody wants to check that out, they can go ahead and like that page and be on the lookout for when those events come up. We have time for just one last question. So Michael, I was wondering, are there any other practical ways that we can impact the environment that we maybe have not mentioned already?
Sure. So, there's a lot of ways. But looking at our other programs, it gets into something Carrie-Anne mentioned earlier, is getting involved. whether that's with our organization or another organization. There's a lot of groups that do a lot of great things. And today we really focused on just one of our programs, but we have a variety of programs, whether it's advocacy, which is just speaking out and writing to your elected officials on topics that are important to you, or education programs, where we host a lot of programs about different topics so you can really dive in if you have a passion in just learning more about the way the natural world works, including our youth and family program where we inspire the little ones, which is always great to see. And then our citizen science programs where we're collecting data. So we recently just had our annual butterfly count where you can come out and help us collect scientific data on local populations. We also have stream monitoring programs. We have bluebird nest box monitoring programs. We have bird counts. So we have a lot of different ways that you can get involved. And then also with our other habitat conservation programs, which involve getting your hands dirty and actually planting plants in the ground. So we always have, we post on our website different projects. I know we'll have one in October with the Willisford Conservancy. We're going to be doing a riparian buffer planting on October 16th. And then on September 11th, we have our native plant sale. So we talked a lot about native plants. We host 2 native plant sales every year at Morven Park with a few different vendors, and we bring in some other people to talk about all their programs that they do in the county as well. So there's always a lot of ways for people to get involved. And as I mentioned earlier, sharing your passion is a really big one. If you bring your friends to a program, if you get hooked, bring your friends, bring your family, get more people, and just get outside and really respect the environment. And the more you learn about it, the more you'll respect it, and the more you'll appreciate it. We just want you to share that passion with everyone else.
Yeah, that's a really great point. The more you know about it, the more you're going to respect it. But it sounds like there are a lot of great opportunities to get involved here in Loudoun County. And we kind of started out the presentation saying, kind of feels like a daunting task to have to try to impact the environment. But I hope that you all have learned something today and walked away from this presentation knowing that there are lots of opportunities for you to do that, even in just your everyday life, right here in your own home and in your own community. And there are plenty of ways for you to get involved through either Michael's organization or Carrie-Anne's or any other organization out there. So with that, we're going to go ahead and wrap things up for today. I want to thank you all for joining us, especially Michael and Carrie-Anne for taking the time to put that presentation together for us. If you want to learn more about Loudoun Habitat for Humanity or Tools for Life Learning Center, you can check out the website, loudonhabitat.org/tools for life. All of our upcoming workshops are posted on our website, as well as recorded ones, just like this workshop, which will be added to our website next week. So you can go back and rewatch it or share it with friends. Our next workshop is going to be in September. We are going to have a master gardener joining us, and she's going to share about how you can plant perennials in the fall and do that on a budget. So if you'd like to join us for that workshop, go ahead and check out our website, sign up, and we hope to see you all then. Enjoy the rest of your week, everybody.